Okay, I think we need to go and start because, so you got the point we made very simply, right? If I want to shape a biblical understanding of apologetics, I need to make sure that I check my Bible first. That's what we said, right? And it seems to be obvious after what we said today, but it doesn't seem to be obvious for very much of the books that we read in apologetics. We think that it's, remember the diagram we draw this morning? Where is it? Did we draw it this morning? Yeah, it works. Like, this is the Christian life, and every time I'm having an issue, with my life, I'm always asking a question, and I find my answers in the Bible. That's what I do, right? Is my marriage life biblical? Is my, doing this biblical? Is my raising kids the way I do it is biblical? We ask all these questions, but when it comes to apologetics, then we don't ask the same questions. It's like apologetic is some kind of we said as fun this morning, like some kind of a tumor I have outside of my brain, that grows, and that does not depend on spiritual life. Some reason it seems that this is the spiritual life, right? And this is the mind life. And remember what we said in Mark 12 this morning is that if we want to worship God, we need to do it with all our strength, all our souls, all our heart, and all our mind too. And so what we want to do is address the questions whether or not the way we do apologetics is biblical. And it's the exact same questions we ask all the time for every other kinds of issues in our life. And we said that there are two main doctrines that most apologetic books won't really use, and people would agree with this. And I'm not saying that apologists that don't include that don't believe those things, but it's funny, it's like we have a double mindset. On the one side, what we do on Sunday morning on a pulpit, we don't do it on the Sunday, in Saturday morning in the evangelism or in our apologetic class. We forget what we say about God on Sunday morning so many times. And there are two things that are very important for us to understand when you think about shaping a biblical view of apologetics. And number one, we said that we need to remember that there is power in the preaching of the cross. And number two, there is power in the conviction from the Holy Spirit in John 16:8. He will come and convict the world. And if I don't lean on the Holy Spirit and I don't use the word, then I'm missing the most powerful tool that I have as a Christian. Okay? So, there is so many other verses that we'd like to go through with you, but I don't think we'll have time to do that. So what we'll do is we're just going to go into talking about 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 31 that we talked about. Pastor Simon read most of it, and Pastor Simon, can you maybe pick up from verse 22 to 31st, and then we will just talk about this.
Certainly. For Jews request a sign, and Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified. To the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and the things which are despised God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him ye are in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness and sanctification and redemption. That, as it is written, he who glories, let him glory in the Lord.
Amen. Okay, so all the credit students had the time to read the verses, and so I would have to. What did you get out of this? I have a few points I want to make on the paragraphs, but those were prepared for the class. Should have maybe something to say about the what. So the idea being is, I think I asked you the question from that text: what biblical apologetical principles can we draw from 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 31st. So who wants to say something about this? There is 5 or 6 principles I want to bring out. One of them we already did, with verse 22 and 23, saying that, they want the miracle signs, they want the wisdom, but we preach Christ. So meaning that we don't always give them what they want. That's one of the principles we brought up. But what are the other principles you think that you found when you studied? Pastor Stan? With the microphone. Thank you.
That apologetics without the preaching of the cross is weak apologetics. It's I don't know where I read this. I don't remember whether this was from I forgot his name, Chester. GK. Or is it? Yeah, GK.
GK.
Yeah.
GKC.
Yeah, but that it was like it was like a defense counsel, but not calling his strongest witness to the, use as apologetics without preaching the cross. Right.
Okay.
Paul is mentioning 3 groups that have distinct advantage in the world: those who have a noble birth, those who are wise, and those who are powerful. In the gospel preaching and in apologetics, none of these things give an advantage for salvation, for believing, nor even proclaiming the message. So we don't need to rely any of those categories in our work.
Yeah, and that ties up with what we said this morning. Everybody can be an apologist because God called all of us. From verse 26 to 31st, he's actually making the point is that none of us are intelligent, none of us are wise, none of us are all of this, but still we are used by God. So all of us can be apologists. Pastor Tero?
I did some word studies relating to these things, and this wisdom or human wisdom is probably referring rationalism.
Yes.
And that was very common there, the philosophy of Aristotle. And intelligence may refer to empirism. So we are dealing with totally the same atmosphere and same type of culture in these days. And then I studied also the word foolishness, and I came to the conclusion that it's not referring to dullness, but actually it's in first place it's referring to capacity, or not even capacity to think, but it's a lack of moral good or human good. And it means that
Lack of moral good.
lack of moral good.
Yes.
And or human good or things like that. And if we're thinking about the world, it's very rational to expect justice, but the cross of Jesus Christ is not justice because it's giving us what we don't deserve. It's actually injustice. And this is the foolishness because God wants to save people who don't have moral goodness, because the whole salvation is based on what Jesus Christ did and his goodness.
Yes.
So if we are able to communicate that type of thing, we are actually shocking the world, because we are totally putting upside down their value system and what they think about justice and things like that.
Yes. It's a great point. The word foolishness in the Bible, and we'll bring it up later, but it's the opposite. It's the opposite of somebody who has godliness in his life. It's ungodliness many times in the Old Testament. So we'll go back to that. It's exactly what you're saying, a lack of moral good. In the Old Testament, it's the same thing. The world is actually making a point that somebody who is a fool is not somebody who is stupid. It's somebody who lacks the moral good, meaning that, and then we go back to the reason being impacted by the fall. The reason why I suppress the truth is not because I don't know it's the truth. It's because I'm actually knowing that I'm suppressing the truth. So it is an ethical decision that goes against the truth. So it's a bad decision. So foolishness is not being stupid in the Bible. Foolishness is actually making an ethical decision. That's a great point. Somebody else? Pastor Simon?
Just at the end where it says, no flesh should glory in his presence. I mean, I think the moment we start thinking that we've done a great job, we have just preached this great message or given this great argument, and what great apologists we are, I wonder whether there's any power in that, and I think the answer is probably no. We are at our most powerful when we realize we have nothing, and
Yes.
it's not us.
And just to go along with that, when you think about this, the reason why we go into in the street and preach the gospel, so the reason why we're doing apologetics is mainly because we are obeying the command. We have to do that. And how funny it is to me that we obey the command to go into the streets, and so we actually go into the street, but the way we do it, we don't obey the command anymore. It's like, okay, I'm sent by God to do something, but I won't listen how He wants me to do it. And that's what we're talking about. That if I'm going into the street to preach the gospel, I better listen to how God wants me to do it also. Okay, so and then we go back to the tumor of the outside of the mind. It's just it's also the realm and the authority of Christ also. Somebody else? Pastor De Vries?
I love this in verse 27 that God has chosen us.
Yes.
We're chosen by Him. We're not just commanded to do it, but actually chosen to do it. Corresponding John 15:16, you did not choose me, but I chose you to bear much fruit. And there's an authority behind that choosing and the work that we're called to do.
Yes. And remember, so the comment Pastor De Vries made, come back to what we said about the confidence we have this morning. And the confidence we have as Christians in apologetics is not only based on the fact that I can argue because I have the skills to do that. It's two things. Number one is because I'm loaded with the Word, which is powerful. I'm depending on the Holy Spirit who has the power to convict. And number three, I have my position in Christ, and knowing who I am won't destabilize me anymore. Right? You can win the argument if you want, but I'm going to sleep very well tonight. I'm good. I know where I'm going, And you, as Pastor Arthur said this morning, though I'm challenged in my hope, I don't lose my hope. Kaya?
So if I think about these verses by faith, it really changes my whole identity. And that really is needed because of the natural insecurities that we come from and the cultural backgrounds. And so absolutely needed.
Yes. Thank you. Debbie?
I just had this thought. The cross doesn't provide what the natural man wants. And in verse 23, the Jews thought that their Messiah would come and set them free from Roman oppression,
Yes.
and that they would help him rule the world. Actually, that was their idea of power. To them, their Messiah dying on a cross was a great offense. And to those who were not Jews, thought of Christ crucified as foolishness. They thought that it sounded like a story or a fable. It was something that they didn't need, actually.
Yes.
The natural man doesn't think that he needs. And they didn't see his death as something that would help mankind in any way. It didn't make their life better, richer, more powerful, or improve their state in any way. So it's something that the natural man is not wanting.
What you're saying is very important about the need. We go back to what we said earlier about provoking. You remember? I'm sorry, let's put a pen here. When we discussed about the probability and all that, we said that the only way for us to actually have a point of contact with someone is about we said the head-on collision, the confrontational evangelism. We don't want the unbeliever to feel comfortable with our discussions, and the reason why is because we said one of the things I believe, not everybody mentioned the word when we spoke about, did a little survey, but I think many people are living dullness. The arguments go over their head because they don't want to go through the pain to understanding what we have to say. But what Debbie just said is also very important for us to consider is that they don't know the need they have, and we do. This is crucial. It's not just about making a point. It's really making a point because it's the life and death is at stake. It's not just, you know. So it's a great point. Anybody else? Okay, so let's go and make the few points I want to make on that, and then many of the things that you already said, so I think it's good. So let's go with it. So I don't want to read it again, but just go through a few verses. So verse 18, we spoke about it already, remember? Where is it? Okay, it doesn't want to come back here. Here you go. So the first two verses, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but for us, it is the power of God. Meaning, remember what we said, it does not mean that it works for us, doesn't work for them. It works for both of us, but they don't know it, right? So it's not like, oh, well, you know, the word of God only works if you're a believer. Well, it works for both, but it works in terms of conviction. Everybody will be convicted. Now, what we do with it is different. So they consider it foolishness according to their own foolishness, right? If you ask, you know, we're going to go tomorrow morning about discussing Chesterton, and one of the favorite themes of Chesterton is the madman, the maniac. And the maniac in his mindset is basically the materialist who thinks that, you know, he's got it all together. And basically, the idea is that if you are a madman or a maniac, then everybody who is not a maniac is a maniac, according to you. And that's the point that he's making in Maynard. He's basically saying that foolishness actually thinks that the foolishness, you know, is on our side. You know, people are thinking, well, it's ridiculous to be a Christian. Actually, it is ridiculous not to be a Christian because Christianity is true. But foolishness brings up this foolishness out, thinking that everybody that doesn't comply with my foolishness is really foolish. So the rules are you know, exchanged. But let's go to verse 19, and I think this is one of the key verses in the passage where he says, you know, for it is written, for, you know, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and the intelligence of the intelligence I will frustrate. The word frustrate here is very important because it actually says I will nullify. It means, you know, it will be gone. But think about this. So the first part, we're instructed by Paul. Remember, I don't remember who said it. I think Pastor Tero said about Paul being into a very Greek philosophy mindset, you know, and actually if you study the Greek letters of Paul, which mean addressed to the Greek audience, he actually addresses a lot of issues with philosophy. And he's been accused of being a weak speaker, you know, compared to others, because at that time the sophists were the philosophers, some philosophers thinking that what matters is not the truth, is how you say what you have to say. So I think we're exactly in the same context today. You know, if you listen carefully to the atheists' arguments, they are not really arguments when you think about this, but they know how to say it. So I think, you know, we're in France, we have one of our own specific philosopher, and thank God you don't know him because you have enough of yours. But this one we have is to me, is one of the best writers I've ever read. The guy is on the top of literature. I've never read anything so well written. He's a master in the French language. But his arguments, zero. He does not say anything. He has one book that is very famous, and I read it several times because I had to write an article for a theological journal on this. And honestly, I think this is one of the best writers ever. But what he says doesn't have any content. And this is exactly what Paul is facing with the sophists. They don't care what you have to say if it's true or not. They just want to hear you and the way you say it. And I think we're in the same context today. So we hear from verse 18 that what we need is a preaching of the cross because it has power. But, and we go back to a wonderful diagram of the tumor on the outside of our lives. This is what we're thinking. This is verse 18, right? Well, obviously, when it comes down to preaching, we all agree Sunday morning, we hear the word and we want to apply it. But when it comes to Saturday, well, Saturday is about apologetics. Okay, I'm going to the street now. This is not church. You need to understand that. Okay, Saturday is not church. So by that I mean that, I preach, I teach, or I hear the preaching, I hear the teaching, but Saturday is the mind. Okay, I need to meet people with my mind. I'm not talking about the gospel. I need to bring people to the mind, because I need to destroy the intelligence of the intelligence. I need to destroy the wisdom of the wise. This is what I want to do. Didn't we say this morning in 2 Corinthians 10:5 that we need to bring down every vain imagination to the obedience of Christ? We said that this morning, but we forgot to say something, and we actually said it. But what I'm trying to say is that we forget another point. We said this morning we can do that if we have our own thoughts brought captive to the obedience of Christ. And we can only do that if we include apologetics into our lives and not outside of our life. The point I'm making here is that, read again with verse 19 with me. For it is written, I will, and this is God speaking, destroy the wisdom of the wise, and I will destroy the intelligence of the intelligence will I frustrate. Meaning, by what I thought was up to the apologetics is actually up to God. I thought the preaching of the cross is the evangelist and the destroying of the wisdom of the wise is the apologist. I always thought that. I'm thinking, okay, well, the evangelist preaches the word in the streets, and I do the destroying of the intelligence, right? Seems fair. Everybody has different gifts. You're the evangelist, I'm the apologist, or I am the evangelist, you're the apologist. I preach the gospel, you destroy the intelligence of the intelligence. But actually, when I'm reading verse 19, I'm not supposed to do that. Because when I'm reading, I'm hearing God saying, I will do that. And why would God do this? And how can God do this? Well, he can do this if we apply verse 18, which is preaching the cross. So you remember what we said earlier about Isaiah 55:11? The word of God does not return to him without doing what he was sent for. And he's actually saying the same thing here. You want to have an impact in your apologetics? Yes, I do. Preach the foolishness of the cross. And if you do that, God says, I will frustrate, the wisdom of the wise. I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the intelligence of the intelligence I will frustrate. To me, when I read this verse and I thought about it in the apologetical way, I'm thinking, wow, this is actually a revelation in my understanding of my role, if I'm thinking that I'm doing apologetics. I thought that we had two different roles. One was the preaching, the other one was the apologetics. And Paul is making a point from God. If you do the preaching, God will do the apologetics. That's amazing to think about this. God will do the destruction of the wise and the intelligence if we apply what he's actually saying. Because we go back again to what we said earlier about the being obedient. The reason why I'm going out into the streets is because I'm sent. And if I'm sent, I need to go, but I also need to go the way I'm supposed to go. So, are we saying there is no room for evidence or there is no room for arguments? Of course there is. But everything must have its proper place. And this is where we're heading right now, slowly but surely. Okay? So think about Proverbs 21:30. And I think it goes with 1 Corinthians 1:19. Proverbs 21:30 says, there is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. That is amazing. Are you saying that God can take care of the apologetical side? Yes, he can. I think if I would have an apologetic class, I wish my teacher would be God. Because he would be the best apologist in a sense. So the point that he's making here is very simple. Verse 18, you preach the cross. Verse 19, I take care of business. Why can I take care of business? Because of Proverbs 21:30. There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. This is it. That's the point that we're making. So we will go back later about what is the room for arguments and evidence and all that in apologetics, because there is. But I'm stressing the exact opposite because I'm thinking many times when we read about apologetics, or when we talk about apologetics, we forget that there is a dependence that we have to have on God. We depend on everything, right, in our lives with God. I mean, we want to depend. But again, we have this famous apologetic tumor on the outside that does not belong to God, but belongs to us. Okay, God can address the heart, but we address the mind. That is very wrong. Verse 20, where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of the age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Paul is making something very interesting as a point here. He's saying that why would we use the world's methods or rules, if we go back to our discussions earlier, if the rules or methods didn't bring them to God? You see what he says again. Verse 21, for since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him. Meaning that the wisdom of the man, the wisdom of the world never brought anyone to Christ. Never. It never worked. I mean, remember what we said about Thomas Aquinas this morning. He built up an apologetics. You heard about the 5 ways of Aquinas. Actually, the arguments we have, the cosmological argument and all that, many of the forms that we have comes from him in a sense. But he did not believe in total depravity. He believed that reason could be used by anyone to go to make its way to God. But the point he's making here is the exact opposite. The wisdom of man was not able to know him. So if I think that reason can take you so far and not all the way up to God, that has to impact my way of doing apologetics. There has to be consequences of the way I understand apologetics. There has to be a way for me to understand that. So, verse 21, he says again, the world through its system, did not know him. Its wisdom, none of the tools of intelligent men were sufficient to attain the knowledge of God. None. Okay? Paul is simply saying that, reason can take you so far. This is what we said. He said in verse 25, and he's actually making a point again in verse 25, he's saying that for the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. At his lowest, God is still unreachable for man's when he's at his highest. That's what he's saying. Let's do it this way. No, it won't work. It works. Okay, this is man. This is us. We are common people. And this is Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking. So Stephen Hawking is maybe here. What do you think, Sam? Is Stephen Hawking more intelligent than Einstein? No? Okay. Well, this is Einstein then, and this is Hawking's. So Sam would be happy. And this is God. All right? And God is weak. Right? And the weakest point for God is the cross. We know that. Now, what is the difference between here and here? Let's do the math. This is the difference. Infinity. So the point that Paul is making is that man at his highest is actually not as high as God at his lowest. So if it's true, then reason can take me so far. Let's think about Einstein or Hawkins. When you think about them, you think, wow, these guys, they're way out there. But did they know God through their wisdom? No, they did not. Because intelligence doesn't make any difference. Because it would take my infinity of intelligence for me to attain God's weakness. Obviously we are talking about with words that does not have any meaning. What does it mean, God's weakness? Really, it doesn't have any sense. But the point being is that Paul explained why the wisdom of a man was not able to know him, because at his highest point, man is not as high enough to touch God when he is at his weakest point, at his lowest point. So why should we use man's wisdom, which is reason, as a base, as an agreement? Why should we agree on a false idea of a neutral reason? That's what we're going to go into later today. But people think that reason is neutral. There is a neutral ground. God is there. Theism is here, atheism is here, and I'm neutral enough to decide which one is best. It doesn't work this way. If the Bible is true, as a non-Christian, he's biased. He's biased because of, as we said earlier, because of the autonomy that he gained in Genesis 3. So let's move on a little bit, because I see the time is running and we need some more time to. But he was able, to. Verse 21 again. For since the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him. So we know that. But God was pleased through his foolishness, the foolishness of what was preached, which is verse 18, right? The preaching of the cross to save those who believe. Meaning that, are you saying, Paul, that man's wisdom was unable to attain God, but by preaching the cross, some were saved? So some attained God. Yes, this is what Paul is saying. So again, the point we're making is that how much we need to remember that in our apologetics, we need to lean on the Word of God and His power, and we need to lean on the Holy Spirit and His action, because the two go together. And if we forget that, then we're going to substitute the power that we have for a lower power that never worked, according to verse 21. Because if I think, because remember what we said earlier, is my reason more spiritual than an unbeliever's reason? Yes or no? As a Christian, do I have a sanctified reason? I don't, in a way. My mind is renewed, but, if I don't live in the Spirit, what's the difference between my mind as a flesh, as a Christian in the flesh, and as an unbeliever? There is no difference. I'm cleaving to the dust. And if I'm cleaving to the dust, and he's cleaving to the dust, and I'm using my cleaving to the dust to help him stand up, we're going to eat so much dust. Right? He's going to eat some dust. I'm going to eat some dust with him. So, it doesn't, some people thinking, and I don't know if you heard about the emerging church. The emerging church, it was started, the movement started by Brian McLaren, in a way. So it has some diversity, but one of the points of the emerging church is saying, basically, we need to help people, in their journey in life by showing them that we also are in a journey in life. So it sounds like very nice, so wow, but the point being is that, if I'm looking for my way, and you're coming to me and says, I'm looking for my way too, you're not helping. Because if I'm lost, you're lost too, we're not going anywhere. When I want to find somebody who knows where he's going, right? If I'm lost, I need the GPS. I need somebody who tells me where to go. I don't need somebody who tells me, it's okay, I'm with you, we're lost together. I want to help anyway. I need to go where I'm going. That's the point we're making. Yes.
A bit of a concern. Do I need to put the microphone for recording
Mm-hmm.
or something? Oh, okay. The concern I had is that you said that Jesus was the master apologetics instructor or whatever. I mean, he was the best in apologetics. And yet, he was not very good while he was alive at bringing a lot of people to belief in
Yes.
Christ, in himself. So, because he couldn't preach the cross, really, until he actually was on the cross,
Mhm.
right? So, and he really relied upon the Spirit to come and bring the whole message, the spiritual message. And he was really doing apologetics, which is not a very successful way to bring people to God.
Yes.
Do you think that would explain?
Well, I don't think it's the reason. I think it's. I think people. Jesus Jesus. Situation is very different than any other situations. Meaning by that, that he had to be rejected and he had to die. It's a prophecy, for him to be at the cross. So in a way, his ministry had to be unsuccessful, because if he was crowned as king as some wanted to be, then it would have changed. Obviously, we're talking about hypotheses that are not possible because the plan of God had to unfold anyway. But so I don't think we can apply that to him. But in a way, again, we're talking about, when I'm talking about effectiveness, I'm talking about effectiveness to conviction, to bring conviction into our heart. We don't measure effectiveness to the number of people saved. That would be a salesperson, right? We are talking about effectiveness when we bring the message to home in the heart. That now the outcome is up to the people's free will. And though we appreciate when we have Billy Graham over the years, bringing thousands and thousands of people to Christ, that's great. But at the same time, what we're saying is that where we're talking about today about effectiveness is to touch the heart. We want the message to go home in the person's mind and heart. We don't expect any specific outcome as a proof of effectiveness. You see what I mean? The difference? Because Jesus was effective because he actually accomplished where he came from. He came to die on the cross. He didn't come to be popular. And he was at some point. But because he preached the cross in a way, he became unpopular. And it's the same for us. What we are trying to do is and the point we are making is, I don't want to alter or change the message to have more people come to church. I want to address the real message for people that come to church to be really saved. And that's what apologetics is all about also, is that we don't change our message for people to come, and we don't adapt the message to the intellectual culture for people to feel comfortable with us also, because feeling comfortable can mean that they actually are saved, quote unquote, intellectually, but they are not saved really. By that I mean they can adhere, they can agree with us intellectually, they can think that, your message makes sense. Actually, I always thought that Jesus was a great, teacher. I think, turning the other cheek, if everybody would do that, then there would no need to turn any other cheek, because there would nobody to beat us up anymore. It's, wow, this is so much of a love message. This is amazing. But how many people do we know that actually appreciate Jesus for what he said, but are not saved? And so I could convince people to agree with me, but that does not mean I actually made a point for them to be convicted and make a decision. So we don't measure the success on how many people follow you. You measure the success on how much effectiveness you had in coming across to the heart of the people you're talking to. Okay? Anybody else? Edwige? Yes. Edwige, she has a question. It's a comment.
Yeah. Concerning using the Word and the Holy Spirit, I have two examples coming to me, like Stevens. He just share the Old Testament and just tell them what the new already. But because of the Holy Spirit and the power of the anointing, reaction happened there.
Yes.
Or also Peter at the Pentecost, he was in the same situation. Or in front of the Pharisees, they were all surprised like these people, they are from Galilee, and how they can have such a wisdom,
Yes.
This wisdom come from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, is that, think about this. The point she's making is very important, because if we want to have an impact on people, then we have to have a thought from somewhere else. When we say something is great, we think, oh, this is out of the world. This is out of this world. It doesn't come from here. It's like, I had the best ice cream. It's out of this world. And what we're trying to do is actually say something that is out of this world, literally. And for me to do that and have an impact, if I don't have the natural capacity, the intellectual capacity that some people have, well, actually I do, because I've got the wisdom of God in my heart. I've got the Word of God in my soul. So when I'm saying something that is out of this world, I'm actually making a point that people will be amazed. And this is what happened to Peter and Stephen in the Bible. They were not, Peter obviously was not a very well-educated man, but he was so convincing with the power and the confidence that he had. And it's exactly what we're talking about, is that, yes, I can have some convincing arguments, but so can have some very well-known atheists also. So the idea is not who has the best arguments. The idea is who will make the better impact in somebody's life and somebody's heart. And we know that the power of the weapons we have is totally different than the weapons there is in the world. Okay, so anybody else? Okay, let's move on, because we need to start to work on something else. So he ends the paragraph that we read, verse 26 through 31st, by saying that, brothers, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standard. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth, etc. And what he's saying is that we've been saying all morning is that none of us seems to be qualified, but anyway, we're used by God. And the point that Paul is making here is the exact same point that Peter was making in 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, is that what matters is our life with God, really. So we do have, obviously, sometimes we need. We are happy, and are we happy that we have some people like Ravi Zacharias and Josh McDowell and Alistair McGrath and some other apologists? We are very happy to read the books, and we are very happy that some are better than others. But because that helped us in a way. But that does not mean that if they would not be there, evangelism would stop. That's what we're trying to say, is that the arguments are amazing, but I do have the best arguments ever, which is my own life and God working through me also. So there is, I think we need to move a little bit. Yep. So there is several verses we didn't have time to look into, but there is this one quote from Spurgeon I would just want to read with you, and that's your quote. I think it's your quote number 2 on your paper. A great many learned men are defending the gospel, which means that he's talking about apologists, and he's talking about special contexts, where some people are actually being very rational. And no doubt it is a very proper and right thing to do so, and I agree with that. Yet, I always notice that when there are most books of that kind, it is because the gospel itself is not being preached. And that is very interesting. The reason why apologetics develops sometimes is because people don't preach the gospel. If the church would do what it has to do, then we would not need some people on TV doing this for us. That's what he's saying, though there was no TV at the time. Charles Spurgeon. I'm trying to contextualize for us today. Okay, suppose a number of persons were to take into their heads that they had to defend the lion, a full-grown king of beasts. There, he's in the cage, and here come all the soldiers of the army to fight for him. Well, I should suggest to them, if they would not object and feel that it was humbling to them, that they should kindly stand back and open the door and let the lion out. I believe that would be the best way of defending him, for he would take care of himself, and the best apology for the gospel is to let the gospel out. And I think he's got a point. And the point we're making again is not that we don't agree there is room for apologetics, because why would I be here, teaching a class of apologetics if I would not think there is room for it? What we've been doing today so far is just making a very simple point. Do we understand all the components, the biblical data, the biblical doctrines that we need to take into account if we want to shape a biblical understanding of apologetics? What he says at the end, is very simple. The best way of defending a lion is to let the lion out. In the same way, and the best apology for the gospel is to let the gospel out. And he's saying that if the church and people preach the gospel properly, then there will be transformed life. Because think about this. Because I had some discussions and debates with some people that don't agree with this, and they're Christians, but they're saying, apologetics is about reasoning, is about philosophy, is about all that, and I agree with this. I'm still thinking, okay, let's think for a minute. If no one would use apologetics and people would go in the street just preaching the gospel, would people get saved? Okay, then you made my point. It is a tool. It is useful, but it's not the essential. That's what we want to say. Okay, is there any comments or question? Disagreement? Contention? Good point. At least I have one disciple. Shall we move on? You don't need a break. Well, we just started 40 minutes ago. Okay, okay, let's go. All right. So we're continuing by doing something else. Up. Come on, here we go. All right. So what I want to do now is to address something that is very important in apologetics also. What do you think, if you would name 2 components of apologetics, what do you think those 2 components would be? We spoke about them several times during the day, so maybe you had the point. Sorry? Okay, argument and attitude. Okay, we spoke about that. So there is one, and arguments and evidence being one also, because attitude is we spoke about this morning. What is the other component that any apologist would agree? We need to address that too.
You were talking about two components of power of the person and the
That's different. It's like, okay, let me reword my question. It's like we spoke about two components that are very important for us as we understand the biblical view of apologetics. But in any kind of apologetics, there would be the classical one, the traditional ones, any kind of apologetics. What are the two components that are key, in apologetics? One of them being the arguments or the evidence. What is the other one? The faith, okay, but yeah, actually for conversion it would be the faith. But what would apologists would tell you we have to address when we address people? Sin, okay. That would be evangelists. But what would the apologists, would say? The mind, right? The reason. So we agree that there are two things that are very important in apologetics. One being reason, and the other one being the evidence and the arguments. These are very important components of apologetics, right? We are addressing reason, and we are using evidence and arguments to address the reason. These are the two main components that we actually face when we're thinking about apologetics, or two major ingredients. And I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying this is what people say about apologetics, meaning that I remember what we said earlier is that, let me find, where is it? No, this is not this one. I lost it. I don't know where it is. Okay. Remember what we said about the heart and the mind? We said that the danger of apologetics is just concentrating on the mind and forgetting that we have to address the heart also. And we mentioned the class of biblical psychology that we don't have a new mind, we have a renewed mind, but we have a new heart. And meaning by that, if I want to have a renewed mind, then I need to have a new heart. But to have a new heart, I need to be saved. And if I only address the mind, then actually I can have a renewed mind, but that renewed mind will not be spiritually renewed. I will have somebody convinced by my arguments intellectually, but they won't make any move spiritually because they will agree with me that, oh, okay, what you're saying makes sense. But having somebody agreeing with you on the intellectual level is not enough. What we need to do is to address the heart for the people to be saved, right? So what people are saying are the most important components of apologetics mainly is the reason, so the mind, and then how to address the reason, then we're going to use the evidence. But we need to think of something very important that I think many apologists forget when they... Where is my... Okay. It's what we call presuppositions. No. And I want to address that for a moment because I want to talk about this because I think we forget that reasons has been impacted by the fall. We believe in total depravity, meaning that the reason, natural reason, can take you so far. You can understand things, but you cannot understand them spiritually, so you cannot understand them fully. That's what we read when we read Paul in Corinthians. And so what I want to address now is how reasons will be impacted by presuppositions. Meaning by that is, if reason was neutral, then a non-Christian would not be a non-Christian. Because he would not think as a non-Christian or as a Christian, he would think as somebody who has no presuppositions. If I am a Christian, I think with Christian presuppositions. If I am a non-Christian, I think as with non-Christian presuppositions. For me, if I am a non-Christian, miracles are not possible. If you bring me evidence for miracles, I will ask to dismiss them because they don't fit my worldview. And that's what we want to address tonight. Because if reason and presuppositions are very important, and evidence, are very important, then I have to understand what the Bible says about this also. So let's read Romans 1, 18 to 22. You want to read it, Pastor Simon?
The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools.
Okay, so you see the colors. Actually, I put in colors the things that are the same theme in the text. So the blue one, suppressing the truth, he mentioned it only once. And then you have the green ones, is that it's clear that the revelation is enough for people to know that there is God. And in red, you have the reason why it's clear is because God made it plain to them. God has made it plain to them. And they knew God. And the underlining, it will be the last point we'll make about what the Bible says about foolishness. And that's what I think Pastor Tero mentioned earlier about foolishness. And we will just bring that in a moment. So, so what are the lessons we can draw from the passage? And there are a few things we can do. The first one is man know God. We know that, and we know from the passage that man knows two things: his eternal power and his divine nature. That's a lot. The Bible says that man know God. The reason why people tell you I don't believe in God, really, according to Romans 1, is not because they don't believe, it's because they suppress the truth. The issue here is not about knowledge or some, if you want to have the technical words, I would say that the issue is not epistemological, the issue is ethical. The issue is not about the knowledge we can have, the issue is what we do with the knowledge we have. So there is a choice that is made. It's not just a matter of do I know God or not. It's I know God, but what do I do with it? So the issue is not epistemological, the issue is ethical, right? Or psychological, somebody else would say. So why do we know God? Because God is clear seen in nature. We know that according to Romans 1. He made it clear. He had several. We had several. God made it clear. This is what you say in green here, several times. So man knows God. Why? Because God is clear seen in nature. How? Because God has made it plain. So God revealed himself. That's very clear. And this is why we know God. And we know that any revelation that comes from God is actually clear enough. God will not make any revelation that would not be clear. And he wouldn't ask accountability from human beings if the nature was not enough for God to be clearly seen. So we're without excuse. Man is without excuse. This is what Paul is saying right now. And how do we handle the truth? The unavoidable truth, then man suppresses it. The word suppressing means hold back or detain, meaning that we keep it captive, literally. And remember we said about 2 Corinthians 10:5, we need to bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Well, the reason why we need to do that is because man takes their thoughts into captivity themselves. They are suppressing your truth, and that's what's going on right now. Okay, so. How does man handle the unavoidable truth? Well, he suppresses it. As we said, why does he suppress it? And this is what we want to talk about for a minute. So, we spoke earlier, remember, about autonomy. And that's a very important word in theology. And what we mean by autonomy, let me repeat what we said earlier, is that most people think that, the difference between before the fall and after the fall is that before the fall, we didn't know that it was evil, good and evil, and we discovered good and evil at the fall. But this is not real. This is not true. Well, we knew there was good and evil before the fall, because we knew it was good to eat some trees and not to eat some other trees. And we knew that if we ate the wrong tree, we would die. So we knew there was some kind of good and some kind of evil. But the difference between before the fall and after the fall is that before I knew what was good and bad from God, and after the fall, I decide what's good and bad from my own authority. This is what we call autonomy. And the autonomy meaning that I gain the knowledge of what's good and bad from myself, not from God anymore. So I don't draw the authority of what is true from God, I draw it from myself. And that's what we call autonomy. And why is it important? Because the Bible says that man has now become a fool. And this is what we call foolishness. So what does the fool say? Well, so the fool suppresses the truth, and this is what he says. Psalm 14, verse 1, he says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, their deeds are vile, and there is no one who does good. So the point that Paul is making here, he's addressing the issue of reason. And remember what we're doing. We're trying to see, is the reason neutral enough in an unbeliever's mind to be addressed without addressing first his presuppositions? Let me back up a little bit of what we said again. There is two ways we understand apologetics. Either I'm going to address reason thinking it is neutral enough for him to be unbiased, so I'm going to bring him up some evidence, he's going to treat him fairly, think about what's right, what's wrong, and make him like an unbiased assessment. But if Romans 1:18 is true, something's wrong with the reason. Number one, we know because of total depravity that everything in man has been impacted by the fall. And number two, we know how it works because we've been told by Paul in Romans 1:18 that the way that reason will deal with the truth will be by suppressing it. So, as a Christian, do I have a neutral reason? I don't. My reason is being biased, if you may, because I am a Christian. I cannot believe that God does not exist because I am a Christian. Then a non-Christian believes the same way, but he believes the opposite. He believes there is no God. And I gave you the example of the discussion I had with my cousin earlier. And, when I asked him what are the official, quote-unquote theories for the origin of the universe, and he said, well, there are a few, and this is the ones I know. And then he expanded, and I said, you're missing one. And okay, well, what is it? I've never heard of anyone. What is it? And I said, well, God as being the origin of the universe. And he said, well, this is not scientific, and he's an astrophysicist, so he's thinking this is not scientific. And I asking you simple questions. How do you know that? I mean, what are your scientific grounds to say that God is not scientific? And obviously, what it showed me during the conversation is basically that he has a biased view of reality. I mean that my hypothesis, my theory for the beginning of the universe being God has been rejected not on the ground of science, but not on the ground of presuppositions. So I cannot talk with him and bring him some evidence of what I think because of two reasons. Number one, he will interpret the evidence according to his presuppositions. And number two, because he thinks at the outset of any argument that anything pertaining to God cannot be scientifically discussed, he won't even want to address the issue of God in a scientific discussion. Those two things are accepted on a faith commitment, on his belief that there is no God. There is no other ground for that. That is what we call a presuppositions. So, I told you we were going to quote Chesterton quite a bit, so let's go with him. This is what Chesterton says about being a fool. He says, the madman is not the man who has lost his reason. He's actually, or is the man who has lost everything except his reason. And that is very interesting for, I told you that Chesterton, one of his main topics that he likes to address is the maniac or the madman. He loves, he loves craziness. And he used craziness to describe non-Christian philosophies many times. But what he says is very interesting here. He says the madman is not the man who has lost his reason. This is what we think. The guy, he's in an asylum because he lost his mind. Actually, no. He has his reasoning process. But his reasoning process doesn't have any connection with reality. That's the difference. I gave the example the other day in the class when I spoke about that quote, and I said, if you go to a mental institution, you see somebody running into the corridor like crazy, and you're asking, why are you running? And he says, because I saw a pink elephant, and then he's afraid of it. Well, anybody who sees a pink elephant would be afraid. And that's the point, is that there is no pink elephant, but anybody who would meet a pink elephant will run away. So his reason works perfectly. I see a pink elephant, I'm out of here. That's the point. So what he's saying is that the madman is not the one that lost his mind, he's the one that lost everything but his reason. And the madman, or the fool, as we said in the Bible, is actually the unbeliever. And how does it apply to what we said so far with Psalm 14, verse 1? Well, it applies very simply, is that the unbeliever has a mind, he has a reason, but that reason, as a madman, will be used to justify his madness, his foolishness. So, I have a few quotes from Chesterton, as I said, and this one is a little long because actually the end of it is useful, but the beginning was so much fun, I thought it would be fun to quote it. A blind mind may be picturesque, but it requires two eyes to see the picture. And similarly, even the wildest poetry of insanity can only be enjoyed by the sane. To the insane man, his insanity is quite prosaic, but it is quite true. A man who thinks himself as a chicken is to himself as ordinary as a chicken. A man who thinks he's a bit of a glass is to himself as dull as a bit of a glass. It is the homogeneity of his mind which makes him dull and which makes him mad. The reason why the Bible calls the unbeliever foolish is because he came up with an explanation of the universe. The foolishness of the world is not stupidity. We are not saying that the Christians are intelligent and the non-Christians are stupid. We're saying that one lives in wisdom, one lives in foolishness. And the foolishness is not a lack, again, of knowledge or intelligence. Foolishness is a decision that is an ethical decision, which means that I'm going to refuse because of the autonomy I gained in Genesis 3. I will refuse God's authority. And by refusing God's authority, I keep my reason for myself. And I'm going to find something that is homogeneous, like a worldview, okay? So we go back to the homogeneity of his mind, which is making dull. And we go back to the dullness, as we said earlier, the dullness being one of the major challenges of apologetics. But the reason why the guy actually looks like he's intelligent, and in his mindset everything is clear. I have a worldview. There is no God, we come from evolution, and everything is fine, right? This is my homogeneity of my thinking, and this is what the Bible calls foolishness. I build up a madness, which is I keep my reason for myself, and I develop an homogeneity, which is a worldview. And that worldview will compete with our worldview. Now, once I made up my mind with the homogeneity, which is a worldview, and I meet the Christians, well, it will be worldview against worldview. It will not be unbiased evidence assessed by unbiased neutral reason. It will be a worldview versus another worldview. This is what we're talking. So, does it make any sense for you so far? Do you have any questions or comments? I'm going to ask you the question again. Does it make any sense for you? Does it? What sense does it make? Pastor Simon, you seem like you want to say something. Gary? You need the microphone. What does it mean? Something that is homogeneous is, if you take let's put it like a cooking recipe. If you like in France, we make crepes, and the result for a good crepe is the homogeneity of the batter. If you have, how do you say when you have a flour and you have some clumps? If you have that, then your crepes will be bad, and if you have clumps, it's because your batter is not homogeneous. So it doesn't go together. So the idea of homogeneity of a worldview, meaning I developed some kind of a thinking that looks like it's coherent to itself. The best synonym would be coherent. And if you talk to an evolutionary scientist that doesn't believe in God, he will think really that his worldview makes sense. Well, obviously, God does not exist, and obviously we came from, the primary cell, the original, whatever what was there, but it's obvious to anyone, right? And then I will quote Richard Dawkins a couple times during the week, it seems so obvious to them. And actually, I'm going to quote him right now. I'm looking for him in my quote list. Not that he is any kind of a... oh, yes. Quote 15, if you have your papers. It says, it is absolutely safe to say that if you meet somebody who claims not to believe in evolution, that this person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked, but I'd rather not consider that. So this is what I call the madness of homogeneity. The guy is sure, if you meet someone who does not believe in evolution, he has to be insane. And actually, the funniest thing, it's the exact opposite. It's because you are believing evolution that you are in foolishness. So, but to him, to the madman who lost everything but his reason, he's looking at you, he says, you should run. There is a pink elephant that's coming towards you, and you're not running. So you don't see the pink elephant, he does, and he's thinking, you're crazy, because if I would be you, I would run too. And that's what we call foolishness in the Bible. So there is a few other quotes that are from Chesterton too, and this is what he says also about a reason being a combination of an expensive and exhaustive reason with a contracted common sense. That is very interesting because it's actually making a point about reasoning. We're not saying that the unbeliever has a lack of intelligence, of knowledge. He does have an expensive and extensive reason, he does, but he has a small common sense. And that's what foolishness is all about. It means that when you think about this really, and if you would be, as an unbeliever, able to think unbiasedly, you would see that it does not make any sense. But the point of foolishness in the Bible is basically it has to make sense. It doesn't make sense for the Christians because with the wisdom we have from God, then it does not make any sense. But in his mindset, it's clear, right? So he does have an expensive and exhaustive reason, but he has a contracted common sense. And the second quote is also very interesting. This is the point we want to make. The reason why the reason of the unsaved and unregenerated man doesn't make it sense is because of what he says at the end. The chief mark of an element of insanity, we may say in summary that it is reason used without roots, reason into the void. And we will bring that up because at some point when we address atheism tomorrow during the day, I will make a case to show you that the reason I think the way we should address atheism is to show what are the consequences. If you are an unbeliever, then you have no ground for explaining the existence of reason, and on top of that, you'd have no ground to explain the reliability of your reasoning process, or what we call the cognitive faculties. You have no explanation for that reliability. This is exactly what he's saying. It's like reason is used without roots, reason into the void. If there is no God, it does not make any sense. But because it's foolishness, it does make sense to the foolish. All right? Any questions or comments? Are we good? Should I proceed? Yes, you have two. Yes.
About the word homogeneity, can we apply it to us Christians? Like we have homogeneity because we believe there's a God? Or is it only apply in the other definition there? Because I don't understand why homogeneity, because their homogeneity, it's a lie, and there would be lumps.
Yes.
So it's not really homogeneous.
Yeah, but to them, that's the point. It's like, okay, let's think about this.
And why does it make them dull?
Okay. Well, if I think I got everything right, and one thing that shocks me when I go into the street here in Baltimore, and I talk to people, many times people, when you bring them to the track, they will say, "I'm good," right? I'm good. I'm okay. I'm good. So I've never heard that anywhere else. But it's very interesting for me because I think it's very interesting because the guy is actually dull. He thinks he's got it together. I'm fine. I mean, don't talk to me about God. I'm doing good. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're not fine. That's the point. And that's in your mind. You have homogeneity because you think everything is smooth. Everything is cool. But no, you're not fine. If you knew exactly where you're heading, you would not be fine. And that's the point. It's if I think I got everything together, then I become dull because I don't need anything, right? I think I'm doing good. And about homogeneity, the idea is that the homogeneity does not exist. there is some clumps into the batter. But because of foolishness, he suppresses it. That's the point. Like when I see a batter that has some clumps into it, I'm thinking I won't use it, but a madman will, because you think it's fine. There has to be clumps into a batter. Don't you know that? You know, that's the difference between. So the idea is he's not stupid. Doesn't like intelligence. In his reasoning, in his worldview, there has to be clumps in the batter. If you don't have clumps in the batter, this is what people are saying about about pleasure in life and everything. Well, we have to have disappointment and pleasure. This is life. It has to make some sense. And this is what I mean by so homogeneity looks like homogeneity for him, but for God, it obviously is not homogeneity. Yes. Well, the difference as a Christian is that I think we really have homogeneity. We do. Andy?
Just to give a testimony from outreach, 2 atheists dealt with 2 different times, and the first one, I was in his house, and he was a man of reason and intellectual and educated, yet I had the opportunity to be in his house and seeing what his house was filled with. If I found him on the sidewalk, I would say, wow, this guy maybe does have it all together, the way he's coming across. But in his house, he just had very strange things up on his wall, comics. I mean, he was a huge guy, video gamer. So I mean, like the movies and the collectibles and graphic things like posted up on his refrigerator. And I'm thinking like this guy is insane because he is living a fake life. Like everything that he has chosen to fill his house with is not reasonable or even like reality, So I found that that stuck with me. And then another time I was on a college campus, and 3-hour conversation, and this guy had all the knowledge, all the facts, all the books in his mind, all the different authors and people he could quote. All I made was I was very simple. I did not have even much to say except addressing the heart issue, like you were saying, and saying to him, the hole in the heart is a real experience that we have. What is your solution for that? And, I had said that maybe an hour and a half ago earlier in the conversation. When we closed the conversation, he brought that back up. He said, you are right. I have a hole in my heart. He flat out admitted it to me. Mm-hmm. And he was brilliant. He was a brilliant man, in his intellect. But he said, I don't have a solution for the hole in my heart, which was amazing to hear him say.
Just a couple of points I want to make. What you're saying is that I want to talk a little bit more about foolishness, because I think this is very important. Because let's think about this. The point we will make about atheism is apart from the fact that he cannot explain the reliability of reason. He cannot explain why. He cannot give meaning to life. We know that if we come from nowhere, we go nowhere, and there is no purpose for life. There is no meaning. But if you address that in philosophy, and Christian philosophers will admit that, okay, well, I don't have many meaning for life, but they will come up with an answer. This is what I mean by trying to make your worldview homogeneous. You have to try to find answers for the questions that Christians ask. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jean-Paul Sartre or Albert Camus, who are 2 existentialist philosophers. And their point being is life is meaningless. They admitted that. That's the point. There is no God. I think it's the most intelligent philosophy. If there is no God, then the life is meaningless. They admitted that, but because it doesn't work in reality, it works only in theory, then they said that because life is meaningless, you need to create your own meaning, right? So you need to find something, and they advocated that they were saying actually that the way for you to have meaning in life is to defend some cause or something. You have to fight for something. But actually, so they are trying to answer, in their foolishness. If you address that, their philosophy brings up the idea that there is no meaning, they will accept that, but they will come up with an answer because they are not impacted by your argument. They are trying to build up an homogeneous worldview. Well, okay, where there is no meaning in life, let's create one. And they are making 2 assumptions that are also foolishness. This is why foolishness becomes even more foolishness. Number one, they are saying that if you create meaning, that means that man is really craving for meaning. So if life is meaningless, why would man looking for meaning? That's a question they cannot answer. And the other one, if life is meaningless and you're telling me that I need to fight for something, for a cause, you're actually asking me to fight for something that is meaningful. So you are trying to you're telling me that my life is meaningless. I need to create a purpose so I actually have a sense of meaning in my life. And I have to fight for something that is meaningful, though life is meaningless. Does it make any sense? It does not make sense. This is foolishness, because it's still taught in the French philosophy classes. It's foolishness because it became dull. I got it together. I don't need to find a meaning because I need to create my own meaning. Doesn't make any sense, but this is what we are calling foolishness, and that's very important. So I'm trying to fill the holes. You mentioned, the holes that we have that unbelievers have in their heart. And there is a quote by Blaise Pascal, a French philosopher also, who said that in every heart of man there is a void in the shape of God, and only Christ can fill. And the idea being is that I have a hole in my heart, and if I'm living in foolishness, I will try to fill it up with something that will never work, right? But still, I'm thinking it works. This is foolishness. Okay? Pastor Charles, yes.
I think you said the other day when we were talking, and Chesterton made reference to this idea of a circle, and maybe this homogeneous way of thinking is like a circle, and it's small when you're insane.
Yes.
Right? Because he says, I'm Napoleon Bonaparte, or there's a pink elephant in the other room. The healthy person says, maybe I'm not Napoleon. Maybe there is not a pink elephant in the room. So if you are healthy, your circle is including reason of a different order, like more objective. But if you're mentally sick, your homogeneity, is it? Okay. Your homogeneity is there's a coherence, but it is excluding the possibility that there is not a pink elephant. It is only there is a pink elephant, and that's all that the man can comprehend and think about. But healthy people have a circle too of homogeneous thinking, but it includes other possibilities, or even beauty, art, inconclusive issues. Like for us, like, does God exist? There was a time when we didn't know, but we didn't say, no, he doesn't. If we said, no, he doesn't, then our circle is getting small. But when you are healthy, your circle is bigger because you're saying, maybe he does exist. So the foolish man may be reasonable, but his reasoning keeps it's a small circle. But when you live with the possibility of maybe I am not Napoleon Bonaparte, then I am living in a world that, like he said, common sense. And didn't he say there that the common sense is shrinking or
contracted?
Okay, contracting. Yeah, common sense contracts, and so the circle gets small, and the man is unable to have healthy relationships and reason with us because he's blinded by his insanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the issue again is as we said, is ethical. Is like the reason why, and actually it applies for us also when you preached about the bigger room. It's another way for us to think this way. Is like we make a difference between the reasoning of the unbeliever who is foolish and the reasoning of the believer who has wisdom. But if I live in the flesh and in my small room, I'm actually living in foolishness myself. Because the unbeliever thinks there is no God, and as a Christian, I think that my God is limited. So I'm still limiting my reason also. So I think the preaching the sermon the message you gave about the big room applies to the Christian and it applies to the non-Christian too. It's like, I mean, for the world is small for a non-Christian because there is no God, but for the Christian, my world can be small too because my God is not as big as he really is. And that's why we're talking about foolishness. And I think as a Christian, I can live in foolishness too. Because if I limit God, then I'm actually not living in the full reality. So I'm living in a small world. And that's why we're talking about here in foolishness being an ethical decision. It's a sin issue. It's not just like the reason why I believe that my batter that has clumps is homogeneous is because I don't want to see the clumps. This is it. So I'm making an ethical choice and actually some will say there is no clumps and the other ones will say there has to be clumps in the batter. So depending on my philosophy, but my diversity of interpretation of reality excludes one thing is always God. So religion and philosophies in the world will see reality in a different way, but they won't see reality for what it is. And that's what we call foolishness, really. It's like I have a small reason because I'm limited voluntarily, because I don't want to include God. We go back to the discussions we have in science. I don't know if you read, maybe some of you read the last book from Stephen Hawkins, where he actually concludes at the end of his life, basically, that he doesn't see any room for God in his model for the universe. And it's very interesting because when you think about this, you back up a little bit, and I think he should have done that before he wrote this. But when you think about this, for an intelligent man, he's actually mad in his thinking because think about it, he knows better than any one of us how big the universe is. I mean, he knows that. I mean, we don't even grasp. We think it's big, but he knows it's way bigger than what we think is big. And the guy can write a book thinking on his own, him among 7 billion people on the earth. He thinks that he can say with confidence, I don't see any place for God in the universe. Doesn't make any sense. This is, I think, foolishness at its highest. We have one of the best brain that humankind have ever produced, who come up with such a foolishness understanding of the limitation of his place. He actually is making a point by saying, I am the ultimate knower. I have all knowledge. I know that there is no God in the universe. This is crazy. So if he would stop for a minute, think about this, and if one day he does, I hope he gets saved, but see, one day he does, he will look at his book and thinking, oh my God, I said that. This is foolishness. It really is, because, I mean, to say something about God with so much confidence, it really has to be foolishness. But in his mind, he's not saying, well, let me rectify, he's not saying there is no God. He's thinking, it's unlikely that there is a God because I don't see room for him. He's smart enough. But still, the foolishness, so I think he's a good example of what we're talking about foolishness because he's a very intelligent man. He's a very accomplished scientist, but still, he has a very limited reason. As long as you exclude God with no scientific reason, you are not scientific at all, really. But people don't see that. Yes? Pastor Simon is running a lot today.
I was just thinking about this video I had seen. I think it was called Confrontations between Christopher Hitchens and a famous pastor theologian. I really don't remember his name. But it was really exciting to me because Christopher Hitchens is, I guess he's one of those people in the group that you call the
four
aggressive, the aggressive atheists, right?
Yeah,
the ones that are trying to displace God and beat him up. But he had this incredible relationship with this person. And what was clear in this movie is that he said that you are the first person that I've seen who actually lives his life the way he believes.
Yes.
And that was the major reason why he never went to a belief in God is because he never saw people actually changed in their heart. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
That's what he said. In the movie.
That's what he said. Yeah, I don't think it's the case because I mean, if obviously, I mean, we spoke about the attitude this morning, so I think there is room for that. In meaning that if Christians don't leave the gospel, then they won't be Christians asked. There won't be questions asked, as we said in 1 Peter 3:15. But the Bible does say that everybody is accountable to God and God alone, meaning that once I receive the conviction from the Holy Spirit, then it's my decisions. It's not how people behave around me that will be an excuse for me to make a decisions or not. But he actually said that, yes. One more things, Peter Kreeft. Actually, it should be 2E, Kreeft. He's a Christian apologist and he's also a philosopher. He said something very simple. He said, we can't avoid reasoning, we can only avoid doing it well. And this is another way of defining the madness or the foolishness according to the Bible. We can, and I think it's quote number 7 in your paper. And what the point he's making is that when we are talking about the influence of sin on reasoning, we're not saying that reasoning is stopped. We're saying that reasoning does not work unbiased way. We're saying that everybody reasons, but the only way we can affect reasoning is by doing it well or not well. So we cannot avoid reasoning, but we can only avoid doing it well. And another quote from Francis Schaeffer, who said something very interesting also, and that is in his book, Death in the City. And it says, in turning away from God and the truth which he has given, man has thus become foolishly foolish. That's very interesting, in regard to what man is and what the universe is, meaning that they came up with this homogeneity, that Chesterton spoke about, with a wrong view of the universe and wrong view of God. Okay? He's left with a position in which he cannot live, because obviously the world that I make up is obviously too small for the reality of who I am. And he is caught in a multitude of intellectual and personal tensions, and this is the foolishness that we're talking about. It means that all the time he has to jungle with all kind of things that don't make any sense. But foolishness is trying to make sense of something that does not make any sense. This is what our good friend is saying. I need to move because I see the time is running. Let me see. So this is a quote by John Frame. He's an apologist also, and he says that thus we can see that logical implication is not a religious neutral something. It is dependent on ethical values, which ultimately are religious values. What John Frame means by that is that reasoning is never neutral. If I am a Christian, I think as a Christian. If I am not a Christian, I think as a non-Christian. And how does that impact apologetic is very important because I need to be aware of the fact that no reason in the unbeliever is neutral. Everything I will come up with him in our discussions will end up as a debate because he will want to debate what I'm saying. Remember what we said earlier about the rules when we talked about, some people want to be in charge of the discussions that we have as a Christians. And we read 1 Corinthians 1, verse 22 and 23. You remember when Paul is saying, the Jews want miraculous signs, the Greek want wisdom, but we preach Christ and the resurrection. Foolishness to some, and I don't remember the other word for it. Stumbling block for the Jews and foolishness for the Greeks, meaning that they are asking to set up the rules of what is acceptable, and we are challenging that as saying, no, you're not making up the rules of our discussions. This is what the Bible says. And if you want to make, meaning that they want, okay, I want to be a Christian, but okay, show me a miraculous sign. Well, in reasoning, let's talk about this for a minute. Like, I did say sometime to those people, some people in the street that want those miraculous signs. I say, okay, what would make you a Christian? If you show me God, I will. Well, if you see God appears in your room someday, what are you going to conclude? Are you going to conclude that God exists? Oh yes, for sure. Are you sure about that? Aren't you going to dismiss that appearance as an hallucination? Or maybe I would. So actually, if you are saying that you want miraculous signs, if God gives you miraculous signs, you're going to dismiss the miraculous signs as not fitting into your worldview. I need to see a doctor. Doctor, I have a problem. I see God in my room. I need some medication. And so the idea being is that the foolishness I have, the reasoning process, if it excludes God as a reality, then I will see God who appears really in front of me as an hallucination, because that's the only way my reason will accept it. So thinking that reason is neutral is a big mistake in apologetics. So let's move a little bit. I just want to say something about truth. Where is it? No. I forgot. There is, oh, yeah, you have your quote number 11 on your paper. It says that reason is good and necessary as long as it knows how to submit to the truth. I don't have it on my paper. I don't know why. Where is it? I don't have it. No, it's blank. So it's the blank quote. This is what it says. Reason is good and necessary as long as it knows how to submit to the truth. Meaning that, reason does not guarantee the truth. I have a little, those who did logic, and sure that Sam would appreciate that. When I was in high school, our logic professor gave us a 3-point syllogism that I kept, as an example to show that. And we go back to the quote from Chesterton that, the problem with reason in madness, it's because it's actually thinking into a void without any root, meaning there is no truth behind it. Reason is madness when there is no truth behind it. So how does it work? Let me show you a very logical argument that is disconnected from reality in a way. So you heard that, I'm sure, many times. Every rare thing is expensive, right? It's a market issue. Besides, a cheap horse is rare, right? Therefore, a cheap horse is expensive. That does not make any sense, obviously. But that is a logical argument. This is madness, if you want. This is foolishness in a sense. So I'm looking at Simon trying to figure out how can the mathematicians can solve the issue. So, I mean, is it logical? I mean, everything is logical, but the premise needs to be challenged, right? Does every rare thing is expensive? Obviously not, because a cheap horse is rare and a cheap horse is not expensive by its very definition. So the reason why I'm giving this is because we go back to the quote we said earlier: reason is good and necessary as long as it knows how to submit to the truth. And when reason does not submit to the truth, then we have a problem. And the reasoning process that we find in foolishness today, this is why we spoke earlier about pluralism, relativism, all these things. And all these things are very important because they are, for us as Christians, when we do apologetics, they are point of contacts for us to actually challenge, provoke the unbeliever's mindset to show they actually is thinking with presuppositions without any evidence as he thinks he does. I want to go to that quote also from Chesterton again. And this is what Chesterton says. What we suffer from today is humility in the wrong place. Modesty has moved from the organ of ambition, and modesty has sailed up upon the organ of conviction, where it was never meant to be. A man was meant to be doubtful about himself, but undoubting about the truth. This has been exactly reversed. We are now on the road to producing a race of men too mentally modest to believe in the multiplication table. And what he means by that is that we are supposed to be doubting ourselves. As a non-Christian, as a Christians, we should be knowing that our reason is not reliable because we don't have truth. But instead of thinking this way, we are starting to doubt the truth. And in a very particular way, this is what he says, because we are on the road to producing a race of men too mentally modest to believe in the multiplication table. And what he means by that is that we are actually making a generation of people that live in foolishness. So I want to end up and have a quick break because we need a break, I think, and have some other points later. But the point that we want to make is if you think that you can build an apologetics on the ground of a neutral reason, then you're in big trouble. What you need to do is to actually challenge the unbeliever in a provoking way, and what we said about offensive apologetics, just to show him that he does things in presupposition. He does not think in a neutral way. The reason why he excludes God, and we could think about miracles. Why do people don't believe in miracles? Because it doesn't fit their worldview. If I bring them, and we're going to go deeper into that in the last hour, about how presuppositions impact the use of evidence. But when you think about this, I've met people, I talked to people about that, about miracles. I mean, why don't you believe in miracles? Because I just don't believe that miracles are possible. What if I bring to you some evidence that miracle exists? Then what they will do is they won't accept the evidence because it doesn't fit their worldview. For example, I said in a provocative way in the conversation someday, I was talking about miracles. He said, I don't believe in miracles. And I said, I have proofs of miracles. And he said, okay, what are your proofs? I said, the Bible is filled with miracles. And he said, I don't believe the Bible. I said, why don't you believe in the Bible? Well, because the Bible is filled with miracles. And that's a circular reasoning. This is the madness we're talking about. The reason why I exclude the Bible is not because it's not worthy of trust. It's because I already don't believe in miracles. So if I prove that miracles are possible with the Bible will never be accepted, not because it's not trustworthy, it's because at the outset, I don't believe in miracles. So the Bible has to be excluded. So I said, so you're saying that if I would bring you a newspaper of today showing there are miracles, you would try to find an explanation to explain that there is no miracles. So any proofs I would bring to you as a proof of miracles would be dismissed because you don't believe that there are miracles, period. And you don't have any reason for that. That's what we call presuppositions. Okay? So let's take a break. It's 8, so we'll meet again at 8:15, and the last 45 minutes we'll see how presuppositions impact the use of evidence, and that's very important too. Thank you.